The next topic I wanted to cover was training. For the most part, new runners shouldn't worry about training. You should just get out there and run. And the more you do it, the more often you do it, the longer you do it, you're going to get better just on your own. But let's say you're 6 months or a year into this, or sometimes a beginning runner has a goal, like they want to run a 5K or a marathon or whatever they want to do. The way you train properly is first you make sure you have the mobility in your toe, your ankle, and your hip flexors. The second is you make sure you're running in good form. And I forgot to mention this in good form, but if you ever can, just get someone to take a video of you, even though you might not be a trained running analysis person like I am. Most running issues you can see. I mean, if you see yourself run, you'll immediately notice something that you're doing that's kind of goofy. So that would be something to do also. But if you want to train, if you want to get better, if you want to train for a race, or if you just want to get faster or run longer, the first thing to do is to remove the obstacles that are in your path. So the low-hanging fruit, if you have bad mobility, work on that first. If you have bad running form, work on that first. If you are stressed out, don't sleep enough, if you're eating sugar all the time, all those things will negatively affect you. Fix that first. So once you're reasonably healthy enough and know how to run, then you can start training. So a lot of people want to train for endurance. To best train for endurance, which is running farther, you need the consistency. If you're just spotty and every now and then or once a week is not going to do it. You have to run more often. And then, like every month or two, try to add a little bit. Like if you're running a mile, try to go up to 2 miles. Try to add another half mile every now and then. And just slowly, but give it a good, at least 3 weeks, if not longer, at a certain distance. For me, I stalled out. I got up to where I could do 9 miles as my regular run, and I did that for years, and I kept wanting to go up to 12, and it took 3 or 4 years where it just wasn't working, and then all of a sudden I had a breakthrough, and then I could. So again, you can't push it beyond what you can do, but you can try every now and then. Another thing for endurance is to add in a long run. You don't have to do this every time, but at least every 3 weeks, just maybe double the amount that you're going to go. You can go a lot slower, you can walk a lot more, but just stay out there longer. Make some time maybe on a weekend where you can get up a little earlier and go run for 50% or 2 times as long as you normally run. Another thing that'll help endurance is don't run every day. You need to have rest days and let your body recover. There's also there's a Dr. Phil Maffetone who's written a lot of books on endurance, and he has a technique called MAF, not because his name is Maffetone, but he calls it maximum aerobic function. That if you take 180 and subtract your age, so if you're 50 years old, that would be 130. If you keep your heart rate at 130 for most of your runs, that's going to feel slow, but it will build more capillaries in the muscles, it builds more mitochondria, and it really increases your aerobic capacity and your endurance. And I started doing that. It drove me nuts because I had to slow down so much to keep my heart rate low enough. So I started out at 13.5-minute miles to stay at my correct pace. But over the next 6 months, I got to where at that same heart rate, then I was running 10.5-minute miles, and now sometimes I'm running 9-minute miles. You just keep improving your aerobic system and your ability to transport oxygen and fuel and get rid of the waste products. So 80% of your runs should be nice and slow and easy. I always call it my forever pace, but if you feel like you could just keep going, that's where most of your runs should be. And then you still can do the speed training or the hills or the sprints if you want to. Also, for training, again, once you have mobility, once you have the proper form, then developing power is going to help you the most. Some of the things to do there, it's really hard if you have a bad habit or if you don't hit the ground real springy. It's hard to just say, don't do that. But if you teach yourself another drill or another skill that's not running, that will translate into your running. So one thing I'll have people do is just try to keep their foot lined up and just do little lunges where you come over your foot and just, you don't do a deep lunge because when you run, you don't really lunge very far. But if you just try to go back and forth and do this a lot and then do it with the other foot, but just get this little bouncy and everything tracking properly and then try to speed it up. That will help. There's also a bunch of plyometric lunges, skips. You can look it up on YouTube. There's A skips, B skips. Usually a lot of those are trying to get your foot off the ground really quick or do different things like that. If you look them up, they can describe it better than I can here, but that will help you reduce your ground contact. You want a nice, quick, bouncy. You want to feel bouncy when you run, not like you're just powering through everything. Also, any kind of jumps, box jumps, hopping on one foot, jump roping. Running is basically a bunch of one-legged squats and jumps. So any kind of jumps you do, as you get better, when you do any of these drills, you want to do them as perfect form as you can, and you just want to be really bouncy about it and try to get good form and power and just a lot of confidence there. And then you'll notice when you run, it'll start carrying over. Also, weight training, like calf raises with weights or just on body weight with one foot. Go slow on the down. Everyone kind of knows that if you do a curl as you go down, you should go slower. That's because the muscle has to lengthen as it's pulling up. That's where you really get the muscle to kind of shred itself a little bit, and you get a lot of growth happening as a result of that. Most people don't know, but if you were to take a dumbbell and curl up, take the dumbbell out of your hand, put it back in, curl up again, you could probably do that 100 times till you're exhausted, and the next day you probably won't be sore. The soreness comes from that slow eccentric contraction. So again, with the calves coming down, slow is going to help. Doing exercises with your glutes, put a rubber band around your legs and walk sideways, but really as you're bringing that leg in, go slow. That's where you're going to get a lot of muscle strength. And if you're doing stuff with heavier weights, they've shown, at least for running, doing a lot of sets isn't going to help you. You want to do heavier weights and even just one set of like 8 repetitions. If you're really loading yourself to where that's hard for you to do, that's going to give you the response without tearing you up and negatively affecting your running. Then part of a training program could also be doing massage work on yourself. And I try to teach people how to do that. But basically the best technique I've ever learned is called pin and move. But if your calves are hurting you, if you reach in and it works better on a chair, but if you find a sore spot and poke into it, then you move your foot up and down, and you can use your elbow or your finger. If that's on the outside of your calf, you can grab your leg and push it into your kneecap, but look around for sore spots. Wherever it hurts the most, that's where you want to work, and then you want to move in a way that hurts the most as well. Now, you don't have to make yourself scream, but you want to figure out where it is it's hurting the most, poke into it enough at least to be uncomfortable, and then as you move, you figure out which angle to move the muscle at so that it's like, oh, yeah, there, that's this part that's tight, that's the part that's hurting me. If you do that properly, within a minute and a half at the most, you'll start not hurting as much, and that's how you know the muscle's releasing or the fascia around the muscle is loosening up and sliding better. If anytime you're doing some self-treatment, as you do it, if you start to hurt more, then stop. It means you're doing something wrong. You might have some abnormality. You might be on a nerve. You might be on a bone spur or something. So it should, even though it hurts, it should get better as you do the treatment. In general, the things that you're most likely to need to work on are going to be your calves and your hip flexors. For hip flexors, it's hard to dig in and do them, but again, those stretches I showed, another good stretch is to hold your knee to your chest, sit on the very edge of a bed, or a table or something and lean back, and then this other leg, as it hangs back, that's going to be a really good stretch. And as you do it, you can kind of move your foot again at different angles and try to loosen things up. Stretching in general can help, but you want to be warmed up and you want to just do kind of short stretches, angle it. It's kind of like yoga. Breathe into it, but then back off and let your muscle kind of recover, and then lean in again, and then change the angle and lean in again. And that can sometimes get some tightness to resolve. I'm going to show you a couple tools that I use. A tennis ball or a lacrosse ball is good for a lot of muscles. If you get this into your glute and lay there on the ground wherever it's sore by moving back and forth, or sometimes moving this way or tilting your pelvis, that wherever you feel it pulling and hurting, that's where you're getting in there and relieving the muscle. When you do it like on a quad, that can be a little bit harder. You might roll off of it. So in that case, I like to use either a rolling pin from the kitchen, or this is a Home Depot paint roller. Just cut one in half or use the whole thing, or cut it in half, give part to a friend. You can lay face down and roll, and when you find the worst, tightest spot, then you want to curl your leg. And if it's really, really sore, you could do this on a bed so it won't push as much. But you also might just be able to move this much at first, and eventually you should be able to get through the whole range of motion. And you want to feel like it's into a sore spot and it's definitely uncomfortable, but you can do the stretching part in a kind of relaxed manner. If you're like tightening up and you're just gritting your teeth and trying to do it because Russell said, you're not going to accomplish anything. And as soon as you're done, your brain's going to say, okay, that's over with, let's never do that again. And it's going to protect the area and make you work less. But instead, if you work it until you get some actual results, and it's like your mind's like on the beach somewhere in the sun having a good time, and it hurts right there in your leg, but you can ignore it, that's the kind of state you want to be at. People will use a 6-inch diameter foam roller. I like those for my back, but to me those are way too intense. And again, if you're gritting your teeth and tightening up to be able to try to roll things, it's probably not going to do you as much good as something smaller. Then I also brought the band. But one of the most important things to strengthen are your glutes. You can lay on your side without a band, and you can do side leg raises, you can do clamshells and squeeze that muscle, but one of the best ones is just walking with a band around your ankle. So if you put your toes out, you're going to disable the muscle you want to work. So you want your toes straight ahead, maybe even just a hair inward, and then just try to go back and forth across the room. And if I were to just go across this room and back, my glutes would be burning. Glutes are very important because they're supposed to be the big power muscle, but when you sit too much, which most of us do, the glutes get deactivated. I've heard it called the dead butt syndrome, and there's other things people will talk about, but in general, your glutes are getting overstretched from being seated all the time, and then people want to ride a bike, so that's always bent over. It's always overstretching your glutes. So for that reason, you don't really want to stretch your glutes ever. You can use the ball like I was showing you, and you want to strengthen them. But a weak muscle is already too stretched. You don't want to start stretching it more. And if you did relax it even more, then these muscles in front can even stretch it longer. So it might feel good to stretch. It might help you sleep that night. But a month from there or a year from then, you're going to be worse off. Same with hamstrings. Again, if the hip flexors are tight, they rotate your pelvis forward and your hamstring attaches right here, so you're pulling up on your hamstring, but the real problem is in the front. So you need to get your posture better, flatten your back, stretch your hip flexors. But if your hamstring is hurting, you can take the little roller. If you sit on a hard chair like a wooden dining room chair, and sit on it and lean wherever it hurts the most, and then just extend your leg, you cannot overstretch the hamstring, but you can get it to relax from that pressure and massage and the stretching. And the reason that works is because when a muscle's tight, it's contracted, and if you can figure out which way to move it so that it's tugging on the exact fiber that happens to be in spasm, the pressure triggers the muscle to release, and as that muscle releases, the pressure sinks in, so it can't tighten back up. So just by doing it over and over and over, it's like slowly chipping away, and the muscle will soften up as it moves in. So basically, that's as much as I have to say on training. First, again, before taking on a training program, make sure you have proper mobility, make sure you know how to run in good form, and then don't overdo it. Challenge yourself, back off and relax, take days off, but then you can push really hard in there too. And that when you challenge yourself or when you push, it stresses the muscle, your body has an inflammatory response, it jumps in and starts the healing process. In tendons, it'll grow more collagen, and muscle, it'll repair or generate more muscle fiber, or your brain will start to activate more of the muscle fibers. Most muscles, when you contract, you're not actually contracting the whole muscle. It's just some of the fibers in there are contracting. So you can learn to recruit more of the muscle fibers, which will make you stronger without having to really be like a bodybuilder and put on a bunch of mass.